Welcome from Indianapolis. I am Derwin Smiley, where my sole purpose is to inspire the greatness in you. On today's show, I will have a conversation with Mr. Mark Miles, the chairman of the 2012 Indianapolis Super Bowl Host Committee, and Mr. Tony Mason, the senior vice president of the 2012 Indianapolis Super Bowl Host Committee. I am glad you are with me. Conversations with Mr. Mark Miles and Tony Mason starts right now. Mr. Mark Miles is the chairman of the 2012 Indianapolis Super Bowl Host Committee. Mr. Miles, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
Welcome back.
With you again. Yeah.
Welcome back to the show.
It's been a while. I'm glad to be here.
The first question I want to ask you is, are you getting any sleep?
You know, I sleep like a baby.
Okay.
Maybe not a lot of hours, but I sleep pretty soundly. And that's because I feel like we're in really good hands. The executive staff of the Super Bowl Host Committee, led by Allison Millington, Tony Mason, and others, is just the A-team. They're fabulous. They know what they're doing. There's clarity about what we're trying to accomplish. I think we're already kind of blowing away the NFL. I think we're ahead on a relative basis of what other host committees would be at this point. And our community just continues to respond in an unbelievable way. So I'm not anxiety-ridden. I'm pretty confident on behalf of all of Indianapolis.
So that gray hair isn't from the stress of the Super Bowl.
I don't know what it's from, but at least it's up there.
Tell me a little bit about your professional background.
Well, it's been a sort of helter-skelter path for me. Actually, while I was still I grew up in Indianapolis, went to public school 70, Broad Ripple for a year, North Central for 3, and then Wabash College. And while I was in college, I got hooked into political campaigns. So for a year that I stayed out of college, working on a campaign, then I went back and finished, and then for years I ended up working on campaigns as kind of a consultant and ultimately a campaign manager. I was the campaign manager for Bill Hudnut's first re-election campaign as mayor of Indianapolis when I was a baby, long time ago. And then I got involved in sports. And sort of the high point in a way was being asked to be the president of the organizing committee for the Pan American Games in 1987. You're too young to remember. But that was a good thing for the community. It turned out reasonably well. Got lots of people involved. I played tennis in college. That was sort of my best sport, and I was involved as a volunteer for the Indianapolis men's professional tennis tournament, and then got recruited to go off and leave Indy for 15 years. And I was the chairman and CEO of the men's international professional tennis circuit. So that dragged me all over the world for 15 years. And came back, and now for 5 years, my work has been to be the president of the Central Indiana Corporate Partnership. And that's a group of folks whose objective is to try to advocate policy changes and do the things necessary to help spur economic growth in Central Indiana.
So you're well qualified to be the chairman of the Super Bowl.
I do have the gray hair.
I know this is the elephant in the room. As we turn on the television, ESPN, the news, and seeing the players and the owners at each other's throats about there's going to be a lockout. How confident are you that there will be a 2012 Super Bowl here in Indianapolis?
Well, it is. It's talked about all the time. And frankly, I'll answer your question, but I'll first tell you we just try to tune all that out and do our jobs and energize and mobilize this community and be ready. We're very, very, very confident that we'll have the Super Bowl in 2012. But what people need to understand is that doesn't mean there won't be a lockout. And nobody knows what's going to happen. It's going to unfold the way it unfolds. And, it's a complex negotiation between the Players Association and the owners of the NFL. I think, many observers think that the most likely scenario is that there will be a lockout. That could happen in March when the current contract expires this March. But what Indianapolis people need to understand is that could very well happen. And that could be extended through summer camp. It could go through preseason games. They could miss some regular season games, and we'll still have a Super Bowl. And, you know, a lot of observers have guessed, nobody knows, but guessed that both sides are going to have to feel some pain before they, you know, really get the job done and get a new agreement. So obviously if you got into the early fall and we didn't have an agreement, they didn't have an agreement until then, and we had stopped working and stopped planning as soon as the lockout started, we wouldn't be ready for February of 2012. So we're just going to keep doing our job and believe that they'll get it together eventually and ignore all the histrionics and all the other stuff going on, be ready to go.
What has been your greatest challenge in this whole process?
That's a really good question. You know, I think the remarkable thing about this community is that people just respond so well. So, you know, we've been able to mobilize the resources. That meant private sector contributions to fund our host committee budget. It means pulling together the professional staff that are so competent and have done so much of this kind of thing in the past. It meant getting the volunteers to sign up and getting that all organized. So that stuff, which is what we almost take for granted, which has worked so well so far for us, maybe the hardest things for most communities, not here. The hardest things are the things we're still looking forward to, that we're yet to confront, that we have to think very carefully about. And those are things like, you know, there's no doubt in my mind that we're in February of 2012, in the week or 10 days or 2 weeks before the Super Bowl, there'll be a lot of different kinds of weather. It'll be warm a day or two, it'll dump ice and sleet on us, and it'll snow, and it'll snow a lot. You know, we have to be prepared in everything that's going to happen for variable weather conditions, changing weather conditions of all kinds. And, you know, that's probably the thing that is the most complicating factor.
We have to go to a break right now, but stay with us. Coming up next, we will continue our conversation with Mr. Mark Miles, chairman of the 2012 Super Bowl Host Committee.
I know because I've been to lots of Super Bowls and I've been to Indianapolis, so let me tell you something. This is a marriage made in heaven. Have you seen what they're planning to do to the downtown during the Super Bowl? They're going to turn a huge section of the city into Party Central. Now understand, I'm not talking about some sort of lame street fair here. I'm talking about Times Square on New Year's Eve. Now you take a look at this place. Building to building, awnings, weird mushroom-shaped inflatables. They look like something I may have eaten in my younger days. Portable heaters, fire pits. It all means that the party will rock no matter what Mother Nature throws at us.
Thank you for staying with us. We will now continue our conversation with Mr. Mark Miles, the chairman of the 2012 Indianapolis Super Bowl Host Committee. Mr. Miles, you touched on the impact or the reception that the business community and the community at large has given to the Super Bowl Host Committee and the whole thing in general. Can you go a little bit deeper into that, how that relationship has been?
Sure. Well, the first thing is funding our budget. And in Dallas, for example, the next Super Bowl host, there's more than a $30 million state appropriation. It's actually taxpayer money going into their Super Bowl. In our case, our business community and a very few individuals, more than 120 companies stepped up, and they're contributing more than $25 million, which fully funds our budget. So there's a little bit of taxpayer support doing the things that our government, state and local, always do, like for the 500-mile race or the Final Four, which is basically security and putting up barricades and that sort of thing. So, you know, it's just an unbelievable statement. And it isn't like this hadn't been pretty difficult times for a lot of companies over the last couple of years, but our companies believe this is important. They're putting their money where their belief is. And the volunteers is just crazy. I mean, the league doesn't really believe we can use 8,000 volunteers, but that's the target we set. So far, we got between 10 and 11,000. We're going to have a hard time figuring out how to really get everybody involved. our community is incredibly responsive.
I think we was in a meeting. I think you, Ms. Mellington, the president and CEO of the host committee, and Mr. Mason, and the idea, the statement was made that the Super Bowl, this Super Bowl, Indianapolis Super Bowl, will set the standard for other Super Bowls to come. What do you mean by that?
Well, we've got a few key goals, and that's one of them. We want to exceed the NFL and the football community's expectations as a host city. We want it to be harder for the next host committee to be as good as we were, set the bar higher. So it means everything. It means, that I mentioned weather before. I mean, there are people who don't live here and people who do live here who think that's going to be a problem. I want the sidewalks and the streets to look like they're heated. And if that happens, our visitors will go, wonder how they did that. Man, are they good. So that sort of attention to detail and nailing the show is kind of the mindset that we have to have. And I'm confident this community will pull it off.
Tell me about the Legacy Project.
Well, this is really near and dear to my heart because, and sort of our second goal, if the first is to exceed external expectations as a host, the second, in no order, is to make sure that in hosting this event and that we can channel all the excitement that it generates locally and do something more important than a sporting event with longer effect. And ultimately, we focused on seeing if we could help the Near East Side neighborhood get farther on their own plan, their own strategic plan for themselves as a community than they might have been able to if the excitement and the resources of the broader community weren't so engaged. So we're trying to help with three things. These are things that they picked as their priority for themselves and would have happened to some extent anyway. One is to improve or build new 200 homes in one area, St. Clair Place neighborhood. Another, and this is now happily funded, designed, and work has started, to build a new wellness and fitness community center called the Chase Near East Side Legacy Center. That's going to be in the Arsenal Technical High School campus. It's for the IPS kids, and it's for the neighborhood to use going forward. They don't even have a Y in that whole 40,000 person neighborhood. And the third is to cause faster reinvestment on their historic business corridor, East 10th Street. And if you drive East 10th Street right now, you'll see a lot going on.
Okay. Tell me about Super Bowl Village. I have seen the graphic design of the Super Bowl Village. Just tell me what is going to be down there.
Yeah, well, this is a crazy idea. But I think if it works out the way we imagine it, it could be, to Hoosiers and to visitors, maybe the signature of our Super Bowl. So Georgia Street is 3 blocks. If you think about where Conseco is, and you go, and Georgia Street dead ends, if you will, at Pennsylvania, right where Conseco is, and then go back west for 3 blocks. It goes from Penn to Meridian to Illinois to Capitol. And at Capitol, Georgia Street stops at kind of the new grand entrance for the expanded convention center. So we want to turn that 3-block stretch into, pick your favorite metaphor, Times Square meets Super Bowl. French Quarter meets Super Bowl. We want that to be a real interesting party that celebrates the NFL. And, we think people can do that in the weather. If you go to the Olympic Games, the Winter Olympic Games, people just get ready for it and they embrace it and they have a lot of fun. So we want that to be a memorable thing for families in Indianapolis and around our state. We want to open it up on the weekend before the Super Bowl. So it runs 10 or 11 days. It runs in conjunction with the league's NFL experience in the convention center. We've even got a little idea up our sleeves about something we might do on Monument Circle each night to kind of punctuate the village. It's a way for us to have more fun as Hoosiers, even if we can't go to the game, and to provide some extra excitement and content for our visitors.
He is Mr. Mark Miles, the chairman of the 2012 Indianapolis Super Bowl Host Committee. Mr. Miles, thanks for coming on the show.
Pleasure. Thanks.
Stay with us. Up next, I have a conversation with Mr. Tony Mason, the Senior Vice President of the 2012 Indianapolis Super Bowl Host Committee.
This is a Super Bowl for the masses. You count on it. Hundreds of thousands of people who will come down to enjoy the NFL experience in the Super Bowl Village.